Okay, welcome back to Playing Pretend with me, Catherine Rossler. So, funny enough, I had like the holders for all the microphones that I have, and I sold them because I didn't think I was going to be doing this, but now I'm doing this. So, I really apologize for the sounds that are coming from me like touching the mic here. I haven't completely figured out how to edit them out yet, and they're there, so deal with it. Since the last episode, because I started posting on Instagram Reels, and just like having a video recording, I felt so vulnerable sharing that with people and with the world the day after. Like, I have this vulnerability and the idea of being perceived can be actually really scary. And obviously this is on a very small scale, but again, you don't really know who can hear it. And at the same time, I think when I'm sharing on Instagram, I have more of a lens into seeing who I'm sharing it with, and I know who I'm sharing it with. Whereas when I was just posting on Spotify or whatever platform, one, at first I wasn't sharing video, and two, you can't see who the people are that follow you, or unless they comment. And so like there's a bit of separation there. And usually, like, I feel like on platforms like Spotify, people's profiles are more private than public, where they'll just be like random numbers or maybe a name and like a photo. Like there's a lot more distance there. So just the feeling of being perceived is it's odd. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it yet. And this week I'm a fan of Chappell Roan, so I watched her interview on Call Her Daddy, and I also read this week Matthew McConaughey's book called Green Lights, because that was recommended by somebody, and I can't remember who, but I read that. And they talk about becoming famous and how it kind of switches overnight when nobody knows who you are to like everybody knows who you are. And they both explain it to be like very, like, they both went through, and I think in general a lot of people, famous people, when people become famous, go through this like a second puberty, it's called, or just like it's very like a lot of derealization, or you go from maybe never being recognized to everybody knowing who you are and knowing about you and thinking they know you. And I think this also ties into like parasocial relationships, which are really new. In the podcast, you have to listen to it, Wild Geese, I really, really like her. In one of the episodes, she was talking about how on Twitch, they have like a how-to or a guide or like an information about what parasocial relationships are. And obviously, I think they exist on a spectrum, but it's interesting how those play into our lives now, because if you are on social media or if you are online, you can watch and like get to know somebody and like learn all about different parts of them just by watching like their videos and the content that they share. And I think especially with video, because you are able to see the person and you're also hearing them and you're hearing the ideas, you build a deeper relationship with them, I think, because you're also seeing them. And anyways, it's a really interesting phenomenon. And I think my understanding of like parasocial relationships, as well as like the people that I feel like I have parasocial relationships with, and then, wherever this goes, and I'm sure like there are probably people out there that have parasocial relationships with me, which is just really odd. And I've posted a lot of things on the internet, especially when I was younger. I would Snapchat all the time. There's stuff that I posted on Facebook that is no longer public. And I have kind of pulled away for a while, and now feel like I'm rebirthing myself. I'm going through this like understanding of like, oh my gosh, people are perceiving me, and it is uncomfortable. Anyways, so this week I wanted to talk about creativity. I've come across this concept in many different facets. So yeah, I want to talk about creativity, kind of like what it is, why we're all creative, and just how it's kind of been appearing in my life, I guess. So I truly believe, I think we're all creative. I think we're all artists. I think play is important. And there's a few books that I feel like are in the zeitgeist that everybody knows about. The Artist's Way, of course, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and The Creative Act. Another creator that I follow, her name is Lavender, and she has like the Artists of Life workbook. And I've watched her for years, but I have grown to change my beliefs and understanding of creativity and artistry when I stepped into my own understanding of calling myself I am an artist. And I really think we all are. I have a friend, Ian, shout out Ian. We were talking about like creativity once, and he's like, yeah, like I have a creative personality. And he was telling me something, because he's like a burning man person. And that was a conversation that he had with somebody there. And I just think that's really interesting. And I totally agree with that. I think like creativity can exist in so many different forms. And we are plain like point period blank, like we are all creative. Even like me talking, and I've said this before, like me talking or like having a conversation is creative. And I think that's why I really like talking, because sometimes when you're talking out loud, your ideas come to you, and that's how it works for me. So in this course that I'm doing, I've talked about it, called Minecraft with M on the Brain, in the week about shadow work. And shadow work, I don't remember if I mentioned this last week, but shadow work, I think it's similar to parts work, or just like it's introspection into yourself. But she recommends like talking it out loud and like talking to yourself. And I've noticed when I've done that, and even like when I'm recording this podcast, that I'm like, oh, like I figure things out when I'm talking out loud, not just thinking inside my head. It is something that we are purposefully doing. We are creating and bringing existence, these words and thoughts and concepts into life. And yeah, I just think that's really interesting how even a conversation, even you talking, I believe is creative. I think it can be art. And I'm just looking outside my window right now, and I'm looking at all the trees, and like I think it's in The Creative Act, Rick Rubin talks about like the trees becoming the seedlings, like, growing out from the ground, like becoming who they are, is creative. Also, like, it is creative to give birth. Like, that is the universe creating it. That is the universe creating humans or birds or animals. Like, all of that is creative energy. Same with the universe. The universe is always expanding as far as we know at the moment. There's also things that we don't know about the universe, like dark energy and dark matter. However, like the creation of the earth, whatever origin story that you believe in, whether it's science, or if you think of like the indigenous story of like Turtle Island, or in the Bible, it's the creator story. And anyways, these are all talk about the creation of life. The Big Bang, that's the creation of life, right? These are all creative energy things that have do exist in our timeline. And we are a part of that. If you and me are a part of the universe, we are that same creative energy that made all that exists today. Nothing would exist today. Like, so this, again, it's funny how, and I think I'm going to digress for a little bit, go on a little sidetrack here, but how as I'm creating in my own life and seeking out things to consume, I'm also noticing how that is creating my thoughts. I have a dark energy thought coming that way. But so many I have three ideas right now that I want to share. One is about airplanes, the second is about my fear of the gray blob, and the third is about this drawing that I made when I was a kid. So I guess I'll first start with the fear of the gray blob. So everything, like all these concepts and things and everything that I've been consuming, I'm seeing exist in my own creativity and in my own life. And I think that speaks to, like, it reminds me of the algorithms that we're experiencing online, and I am consuming a lot more online content. Even like my books that I'm recommended, I use Goodreads. I love Goodreads, or the Mississauga Library, even Indigo. When I'm searching out these things, they probably all exist on some kind of algorithm. Like, if you like this, you'll probably like this. And then so in my life, I'm seeing like I'm getting so much more feedback that is what I like and what I'm interested in. And it's interesting. And I've seen this, the phenomenon on TikTok where people talk about, oh, I'm on this side of TikTok. Like, are you on cottagecore TikTok, or are you on like silly, laughing, ridiculous TikTok? Like, there's different sides to the algorithm, and like in our own lives, like we are in that feedback loop as well. And I think it's really interesting how I do see it happening more in what I am consuming in my zeitgeist, I would say, but also, if you're listening to this, you've probably heard some of the things that I'm already talking about because of this phenomenon that I'm talking about, which I think is really interesting. And yeah, so how this relates to the fear of the gray blob is back in 2012, I want to say, I was working the summer job, but I was very depressed and paranoid. I had this, and it wasn't like when I'm speaking this to you, my words cannot properly articulate the feeling experience that was like going on in my mind. Same earlier as I said, how like the phenomenon of being perceived, it's something that I try and express, but it doesn't come out the same way. It doesn't come out how I want it to come out. Anyways, so the fear of the gray blob. Basically, I just was in this state of mind where I would like think of, I want to say like thousands, millions, I don't know, into the future, I would think. And I had this concept where it was like everybody over time, I could see the evolution of all of us back into these beings of being gray blobs. And it was this fear of like, oh my God, we're all becoming the same, where brains are turning to mush. And even when I say it now, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I think it taps into my paranoid neural pathways. But if you know, if you feel me, if you know what I mean, then you can tell me. But so jump back to this other idea that I was thinking of was the airplane. Like, so everything in our life has been created by like, not everything has been created by humans, but like flying, seeing airplanes, an airplane, it was once said at one point that it wasn't possible, but somebody believed that it could be. Many people did over time, and then it became possible, and now we have fucking flying machines in the sky. I get it. Like, I understand how they work, but still, when you think about it, you're like, there's something fucking flying in the sky that was man-made. Like, it's not like this was an evolution over millions of years, like birds and shit, because I'm pretty sure those came from dinosaurs. But it's not like a super old phenomenon. Let me look it up. When did humans first fly? 1903. That's kind of fucking crazy when you think about it. Hot Air Balloon, 1783. Still, though, kind of fucking crazy that is how long ago, because that's not that long ago. It really isn't. Anyways, third idea that I was thinking about, that I was just talking about, is, so when I was a kid, I drew this image, and I remember thinking about it often. And it was this concept where basically I draw a circle, and then off of each circle I draw 3 lines. And then at the end of each of those lines would be a circle, and then each of those circles would have 3 lines. So every circle and line on this page would have 3 lines, until it got to the point that there wasn't any more space in that area to draw 3 lines and 3 more circles on it. So sometimes it would just end with a circle. And the thing I used to think about it a lot was like, when you are having your thoughts, your conversation and ideas can branch off in so many different ways, but along the way there's some that like get lost or that we don't explore. And so it was thinking about the connections that we're making with our thoughts in our brain and these like lost ideas along the way. And that was relating to this idea of creativity. I was like, oh damn, like I've always been a deep thinker. And it was like I was experiencing that concept that I was writing it about, drawing in real time. Well, that was a little mishap. I apologize. There probably was like 8 minutes there of me not recording on the microphone, which, me and tech right now, we're just figuring it out. We really are just figuring it out. Okay, we're back. So I was talking about that drawing that I made as a kid. Editing Catherine here. So I think I missed sharing why I was sharing these 3 points. The first, airplanes came into existence because people had that idea, and it came from that shared creative energy that I was talking about. And it may not have necessarily been one person's idea, but that like universal creative energy. And then the gray blob, that was related to my fear and of us like all becoming the same. And sometimes I see, and I talk about this in the episode, but like how what it is that I'm consuming, I then regurgitate out, and then how maybe one day we'll all just turn our brains to mush, and that will make us think more alike than we actually think or plan to, just because of the algorithms that run our lives. And the third was how these 3 changes have nothing to do with each other. And that was the point of my drawing, was that sometimes I'll be like having these thoughts come to me, and I can choose, okay, which one of these thoughts am I going to share right now? Because I have so many of them and I don't know what to do because I have so much fucking going on in my brain. I feel like I could update it to be my brain now. But I think it's just interesting to see, it's like, okay, how we create ideas over time. It comes back to this idea I've talked about, or I think that really inspires my art that I learned from my professors in university. And it's one of the things that stuck with me from that time is tabula rasa, which is basically we come into this world with a blank slate, and then through what we consume, kind of that's what fills our mind. And that's the state of mind that you want to be in when you are creating art. And I think I also need to note here that I really think I really cross over personally the idea of like art and creativity very crosses over for me. I think they are one and the same in different ways. If it were a Venn diagram, they would be largely overlapped. And also just the idea of like being an artist or being creative, I think there's this perception in the world that you have to be an artist, be a painter, be a writer to be creative. And I really don't think that's true. If you were to ask my dad what he thinks, he would say that, you don't want to be a creative accountant because you would probably be committing fraud. So, yeah. But then again, fraudsters are creative. If you are stealing from a bank or committing a crime, you have to be creative in the way that you're committing it. But let's not talk about that. So in the books that I mentioned earlier, The Creative Act, Big Magic, The Artist's Way, and different ways, like I'm sure there's so many different ways that people have expressed this idea of creativity in many, many different ways over many millions, not millions, thousands of years, hundreds of years. Also, this links to the idea that is shared in those books is like ideas aren't ours. They're like just in the ether. They're part of the collective. They're just these things that come to us, but they come to many of us at different times. And when it comes to you, you can either create it or it's going to go on to somebody else. And I think that speaks to this idea of like, yeah, we are all sharing the same world, and we are all consuming things that are similar, but also maybe what is a force outside of our understanding that we don't know? It makes me think of like ancient civilizations, and I'm sure I've seen this on like a BBC documentary or something, but where, the ruins in like Cambodia and Egypt and the Mayan ruins, they all have like similarities in how they were built. And you could speak to that, be like, say it like at that time, that was the knowledge of architecture that they had. And like that was all that was available to them at that time. Therefore, that's why they were built the same, because of the forces of gravity and physics and whatever else goes into building. I'm not an expert on that. However, could the same not also be said for like any idea that like there are certain constraints that limit us to what is within our realm of understanding, and things like the plane flying, like once you kind of step slightly outside that box is when there is innovation that's happening, although maybe it's not, I guess, yeah. So some of those like stepping just outside of innovation, that would be like where there is these new ideas. Hey, editing Catherine from the future. I think what I was trying to say there is like innovation is proof that your ideas can become reality, especially when it's something as far out as a plane flying in the sky. And those ideas might have existed for a very long time. Like people wanted to fly because they're like, oh, birds could fly. I want to do that. So the ideas existed a long time, and then it comes into fruition. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that, sometimes we feel like our ideas, like we're so possessive over them, but it doesn't mean that somebody else somewhere could be having a similar idea at the same time. This definitely goes into, and this would be a really interesting topic to dive into, when does it become, is it being stolen, or is it just that people have had the same idea at the same time? Like something I'm really noticing now is I'm noticing collage art events and junk journaling pop up everywhere. But again, this is because that's what's in my zeitgeist at the moment. So that's just what I'm seeing and perceiving. Was it always there? I don't know. I'd have to do research into it. But just the idea that like somebody had this idea in New York, somebody else is having it in, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Africa. Ideas aren't always ours, although we perceive them to be. And personally, I feel like I have constant ideas running through my head. I feel like I get these, it's almost like I get hit with a train, or dumped, like a bucket of water gets dumped over my head or slushed through my brain, and it's just like it's like bam, I get hit. I'm like, oh my God, like what am I supposed to do with this all? Because ultimately I'm like, I just want to do everything. I want to pursue everything. I want to make it all. And I think what I'm trying to do now in my life is become a bit more detached from my ideas, share them a bit more freely, and work on the ones that I want to and that like bring me excitement and passion, because ultimately some of the things I think about that I think are cool aren't necessarily exactly what like I want to be doing in the world. And yeah, I kind of want to talk about my idea of art and creativity. So I think the way I perceive it is like art is this box, or creativity is this box that you can put anything into, anything you want. And this idea was shared recently. I think that the idea of like a sandbox, it's like you have a sandbox of tools, or you have like, you have this box and you can put anything you want into it and see what you come up with it. That was like a game. Anyways, so art is like you can put anything you want into the box and then create from there. I think it's, linked. It's such a multidisciplinary space in my experience and understanding. Yes, painting is a very traditional use of art. So is like weaving and pottery. However, I really think it expands past that. I think in the contemporary world, in this modern day and age, we've encompassed it to reach so many far corners in our brain. And I do actually think that's what we should be doing. I think art is what people were meant to be making, or whatever people were making at the time that they were making it is art, because that's just showing the world exactly what it needs to see or hear, because that is what art is. It's not supposed to, I don't think art should have any rules or constrictions, and some of it I do think is stupid as fuck, but that doesn't mean that I don't think it's art. Or I might not. I might argue that it isn't. But I still, at the same time, it shouldn't not exist. Like, things that pop into my head are like banana duct tape to wall or shit in can. Forget who made those, but they're fucking weird, man. But people in the art world argue a lot about them. So obviously it's hitting something that needs to be there. That somehow, whatever reason, it needs to be in the world. I think this also really taps into makes me think of consumerism and plastic and how much more that has, we are in the age of consumerism equally as we are in the age of creativity. I think they go hand in hand. There's more there's more that's being created, therefore there's more to consume, and vice versa. It is like the input to output ratio. It just kind of, they worked in tandem. So we are in, what people have referred to as a new renaissance that happened after the pandemic. And I think that's true. I definitely resonate with that. I feel like it got so many new creative juices flowing. I feel like it was a disruption of the world in all the different systems that exist. It affected us globally. And it was an experience that was happening in real time, whereas something like climate change, it's happening in real time, but we don't, or not everybody directly experiences its effects. And it's not like yesterday or the past 2 days here where I live just outside of Toronto, we had snow and rain, and it was negative whatever one day. The next day it was plus 18. And of course the river was extremely flooded, all the the pathways and just up onto the riverbanks. It was kind of insane. I went to go look at the local park near my house because I was interested. I was oh, I'm curious to see. There's a bridge over to this island in the middle of the river, and completely flooded. Just a really and I don't want to, I'm sensitive when I say this, it was beautiful because it hadn't yet reached that destruction of anything. I didn't see that. However, I do want to preface that with saying I know that things like that aren't beautiful, and they do cause civil destruction and suffering all around the world. But I think in that experience, it was just interesting to see maybe I'm gonna say the calm after the storm, where it's okay, there's the idea that came to me was just we do not control you being the environment, being nature. It is so powerful and so controlling over, it is going to wipe out whatever it was going to wipe out, whether we like it or not. And we build these rigid structures pathways and homes to be in control and to have some permanence, but that's, Mother Earth, she ain't about that. She doesn't know. She's just going to do what she does because that's what she was meant to do. Editing Catherine again. I'm realizing today on the pod, I am missing sharing the point or having, a closing statement. My brain is a a little mush. Here I was just trying to bring the idea together back that whatever art you make or whatever art is made is meant to be because it is part of that creative energy. It exists because it was made, just the same way that Mother Nature can be destructive and does what it does. There isn't this control that we have over it, and I think whatever you make, it was meant to be. All right, so I think that's probably all for today. Talked a bit about creativity. I was a bit late recording this episode because a lot of things happened this week. And my fear of being perceived overtook me. I got a little insecure about the podcast for a moment. Somebody said something to me and it really upset me. But we're back. We're here. It is past the time that I was originally going to post it. So we're figuring that out. We're also figuring out, can I post weekly? Because now I'm realizing, I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, it took me like months to post the first 6 episodes or 5 episodes. But I'd like to, push myself, give it a try. Let's see how it goes. At the same time, I don't want to overexert myself and feel like I'm forcing it, because if you force it, it's probably shit. So hopefully this wasn't shitty today. I do want to try and bring in a bit more structure in the beginning. I really like the idea of having like three ideas or topics that overlap and kind of talking about this box, this art, like what I've tossed in my art box at the moment, what I'm thinking about, what I'm playing around with, what I'm understanding in my brain, and also talking about the books I'm reading, because I'm reading some really interesting books. Like I'm reading this book called Your Brain on Art, How to Transform the Arts, and I also just read this book called Two Heads, a graphic exploration of how our brains work with other brains. Very good book. And I feel like I need to go back and like take some notes and maybe have a better system to this podcast, but I'm still figuring out. Remember that a few episodes ago when I said this was an experiment? Yes, this is an experiment. Okay. I am going to export this and hopefully upload it not too long from now, and going to try and not do too much editing. I am trying to edit myself in real time by not saying so many ums and likes all the time. Anyways, have a good Friday. Okay, goodbye.